All right, today we're going to be working on some irons that are, well, quite frankly, kind of difficult to deal with. I'm going to give you some tips and tricks, help make it a little easier. Let's go. Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. Hope you're having a wonderful day. So I did a video a ways back talking about one of the best clubs I thought if you were getting into club building, club repair, to start your journey on because it was a very straightforward process. It made everything very simple. Well, this video we're going to be talking about the iron, or maybe the brand of irons that's on the opposite side of that spectrum. That being the brand that likes to throw a lot of curveballs at you, likes to do things their own way, and maybe, I don't know if it's the best way, but you're going to have to deal with it if you want to work on these clubs. That brand is Ping, and the irons today are these I-230s. All right, pulling the shaft and head apart, as you can see, basically the same practice as any other club. Hopefully you also noticed, though, that there was a little bit of extra plastic down there at the bottom of the ferrule when we took it apart. Now, what is that? Well, it all has to do with how Ping designs their hosels. Most hosels, when you have a traditional hosel, it comes in two basic forms, either a parallel tip where the walls are the same, going parallel down to the base, or tapered where they're slightly wider at the top and slightly more narrow at the bottom. Now what Ping does, and also what PXG does, is they sort of, I don't know, the best way to describe it would be taking two completely different hosel sizes and fusing them together into one. So the bottom of the hosel has a certain diameter, but then the top of the hosel has a much wider diameter, a much wider opening. So look, if you're going to go reshaft some Ping irons, or you take them somewhere to have someone reshaft them, you may go, or they may go online, read some articles, read some forum posts about how do you reshaft Ping irons because of this extra gap in the hosel. And most of them are going to tell you to get these little Ping adapter ferrules that fit down in there perfectly and supposedly make the whole process seamless, quick, easy, no problem. The problem is this is not the right tool for the job. This is absolutely, and I cannot stress this enough, the worst possible thing you could use when reshafting these Ping irons. 3 reasons why these little Ping adapters should not ever be used when you are reshafting these irons. Number 1, they're more expensive than a standard ferrule, and as we will cover in a minute, they don't actually do the job. So you're paying more for something that doesn't work any better. Problem number 2, you pick one of these ferrules, one of these adapter ferrules, and use it because you think it's going to give you a better, more centered, more snug fit that's going to streamline the process and make it easier and make for a better result. But what you'll quickly find is if you take one of these and you insert it into the head, and then we put the shaft in through that ferrule adapter and the head, guess what? This ferrule adapter that supposedly is supposed to keep the shaft centered and keep it from wobbling around doesn't actually do that. Yes, it grabs the top of the shaft right there at the ferrule side of it and kind of holds it in the middle, but the base of it is still able to wobble around, rotate around 360 degrees, which means if you take one of these, glue it together, and set it leaning on something, that shaft can move all over the place and give you a completely lopsided result. And not to mention, once again, the epoxy bond, there's a lot of space still. That means the epoxy bond is not going to be as strong, and you have a more likely chance of a failure. 3rd reason why I would never use one of these ferrules is, guess what? They all look exactly like this. Now, there's nothing wrong with a completely black ferrule, and if you like a completely black ferrule, that's fine. But what if you want something a little more exciting, like what I'm going to be doing with these I-230s? We're going to be using some BB&F ferrules. We want something with a little more color, something with a little different pattern, whatever. Well, guess what? These Ping adapter ferrules only come in one color, only come in one style, plain black, short ferrules. All right, I said there were 3, but guess what? There's actually a 4th reason why these adapter ferrules are not the right tool for the job, and that has to do with ferrule creep. Now, if you don't know what ferrule creep is, that is very simply when the ferrule and the hosel start to separate. Now, this happens all the time, especially with older clubs, because when you swing the club a lot, the shaft flexes back and forth, and what ends up happening as that occurs is it kind of works the ferrule loose and it starts to rise up the shaft a little bit. Again, happens all the time. You'll see it often on older clubs or with people who swing the club really fast, have a really hard swing. That extra flex that they put on the shaft forces that ferrule up a little bit easier. Now, again, it happens all the time, but I find that it happens especially often when you have these kinds of adapter ferrules. This extra material, the way this is designed, I feel like the engineers kind of missed the mark here because it comes loose a lot easier than a traditional ferrule. So beyond all the other reasons we've already covered, you are far more likely to have that shaft and ferrule start to show that ferrule creep with one of these adapter ferrules. So what are we going to use if we can't use that Ping adapter? What is it that can give us the correct fit in the hosel, make sure the shaft is aligned and not leaning one way or the other, make sure we'll have a good epoxy bond, and let us use whatever ferrule we feel like using? Right there, the brass shim. All right, just finishing up mixing some epoxy for the build. And now let's get into how to use these brass shims. Again, remember, if we were doing this with that little adapter, we get all this wobbling around. You can see that ferrule creeping up. None of that is what we want. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to start out the process just like any other build, which means epoxy, a light coating inside the head, and going to put a single little ring of epoxy right here so we can slide the ferrule on and hold the ferrule. Again, we're using brass shim, so we can use a little bit more interesting ferrule than just a plain black. And we'll go ahead and slide that on into basic position. Now for this particular build, we're also going to be adding some weight to some of these heads to make sure they all balance out evenly and correctly. So we're going to be using some different tip weights. So we're going to go ahead, put the tip weight in right now. And now we're going to add some epoxy, just a little bit again, over the tip section of the shaft. All right, now we can add our brass shim. I've gone ahead and just roughed up with a little sandpaper both the inside and the outside of the shim, just again to help us get as good a bond as we can. And I'm just going to stick that right over the end, and then just one more time we're going to add just a little bit more epoxy just to kind of coat each of the legs on this shim. At this point, we can put this together like any other club. Make sure we're holding it kind of in this position so we don't have anything fall out while we're putting it together. And we're just going to kind of work it together. It's going to be snug, so we're just going to work it. We're going to drip some epoxy on the table, but that is fine. May have to tap it down a couple times. Just to get it fully set. Now we can bring it up, rotate it into position with the shaft logos where we want them. Like that. Finally, we can wipe off the excess. Just like that. And again, notice with what we did here, the shaft is nice and centered. It's not leaning this way or that way, and it's incredibly stable. It is not wiggling. It is not moving around at all. It is nice and snug in there, so we don't have to worry about either of those issues. And here is the final product, again, with the ferrule that we want, fit properly, and with the shaft aligned properly in the hosel. You cannot get that with that Ping adapter. It just doesn't work right. So brass shim, again, I will leave a link down in the description below for the exact shim that I would recommend using if you are reshafting any of the modern Ping irons. If you're not interested in reshafting them yourself and you'd like a professional to do it, definitely get in contact with me. You can reach me at elitefitgolf.com. If you enjoyed this video, please go down below, like, comment, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Make sure you hit the bell icon so you'll be alerted when I post new videos, and I will see you next time.